I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Frédéric Herman, who is the rector of the University of Lausanne. He's also a geoscientist, and his research concerns understanding the interaction between climate and Earth surface processes, with a particular focus on high mountain environments and the cryosphere. Before becoming rector, Frédéric was Dean of the Faculty of Geoscience and the Environment at UNIL, where he was integral in the implementation of hiring strategies that resulted in the appointment of a number of women professors. Over to you, Frédéric.
Thank you, Georgina, and thanks also to the organizers for this meeting today. And also like to thank Janet for what she said. It was actually very inspiring. There's some things that I will probably repeat. I also like to apologize for my voice. It's not that I kept drinking yesterday, but it's just I just got a cold, and I hope that I'll be able to speak clearly enough. For this talk, what I wanted to do is actually share some of my own experience, mostly as dean, and maybe I'll mention some of the things I see now as rector. And one of the things that struck me when I became dean is that you actually spend a very significant part of your time in evaluating people. And I realized through that time that you can actually have an impact if you committed to make some change happen. And by saying that, I like to encourage anybody who's in the room is that actually, if you go into these leadership positions, you're actually into a position where you can make some change happen. And it's also one of the things that motivated me to move on to a rector position. I'll try to change the slide. Yeah. So, and I decided to start this talk by a statement of Swiss universities. And for those who don't know Swiss universities, it's kind of the associations of all the universities in the country, and its primary goal is to have a common voice for all the Swiss universities. And there's a statement, if you go on the webpage of universities, of Swiss universities, that says that the quality criteria of the appointment procedures for professors is an important issue in Swiss and European university policy reforms. And the quality of recruitment is also measured by this ability to guarantee equal opportunities. And the promotion of equality and diversity is a necessary condition for achieving excellence in our institutions. And I wanted to show that because, in fact, all the Swiss universities agree that it's a very important aspect of universities. It's actually also taken into account when we get evaluated for the accreditation. And we wouldn't be allowed to be called a university if we didn't take that dimension into account. The other thing that I wanted to mention, and that's something that Janet said during the questions, it's like the goal is we need equality and diversity to achieve excellence, but there's some questions about what is excellence. I mean, we have difficulties defining it ourselves. And I cannot agree more with what was said before, that we need to have some diversity itself on recognize different aspects of our work and just reevaluate what we want for the future of academia. The other thing that I wanted to say at the beginning of this talk is that there's also a legal basis in Switzerland that's a law that was proposed in '96 that says that there's a legal basis for equality between women and men in working environment. So in fact, what it says is that when we hire people and we make decisions about funding and etc., we actually have to take on a legal basis equality into account. So now I'll come to some numbers and the reality after these big statements. I'm aware that universities and rectorate and presidencies have made these big statements for a long time. But if you look at the number, and I'm just going to repeat some of the numbers that were said before, it's not looking that great. I mean, only 25% of professors in Switzerland are women. And when you see the numbers, it's changing, but it's changing very slowly. All I can do here is look first at the numbers of the University of Lausanne. So we have about 500 professors. And what you see here, it's how it has evolved in the last a bit less than 10 years. When the x-axis, you have the time, the dates, And in the y-axis, it's, sorry, it's in French, but it's updated, so it's full-time equivalent for professors. And what you see is that it evolved from about 20% to 27% professor at the university scale. And I have to say that in opposite to what Janet was showing, here it includes all the faculties of social science and humanities who have more women. And we have an example at the University of Lausanne where it's the Faculty of Arts, where we actually have gender equality. So that says that in some disciplines, we're actually very far from this 27%. The other thing that is worrying is that if you look at the percentage of women being recruited in the last 3 years, and it's shown here for 2018, 2019, and 2020, this part has actually been decreasing. Okay, so despite the fact that Swiss universities and the University of Lausanne has been saying that we needed to reach equality by 2050, we see that in the recruitment procedure, this is going down now. So as it was said before, it's clear that it does not reflect society. If you look at the bachelor, master, and PhD level, we have 55% women. So clearly we also observed this leaky pipeline. And obviously we're not the only institution. Here's a diagram from ETH Zurich, more or less the same statistics as what Janet was showing. So what you see here is the different level from bachelor level to full professor. The dark blue is the percentage of female professor, and the light blue is of the female part, and the light blue is the part of the male percentage. And what you see is that as you go into the level towards the full professor, the proportion of women is clearly decreasing. The other thing I wanted to show is that you can look into more detail about the difference between full and assistant professor, and it's shown here where in blue it's the percentage of full professor, and in green, it's the percentage of assistant professor. And what you see is that you had a clear increase between 2006 to 2012, going from 12% to nearly 30% for the assistant professor. But this increase is followed by a constant decrease. And it's exactly what Janet was saying before, is that if you actually don't continuously pay attention to the way you hire, and you think, okay, now we've made an effort and everything is right, you go back into the other direction. So you actually always need to keep your eye on the ball. So here, and as I said at the beginning of the presentation, I just want to say a few words about my own experience. So my own experience in the recruiting procedure was within the Faculty of Geosciences and Environment at the University of Lausanne. I just want to draw your attention that it's still a fairly small faculty. Today it's about 35 professors. So it depends how you count it. But you have to be aware that here I'm going to talk about small number statistics, and that applies for the rest of the talk. Obviously, you need to look at a bigger scale. And what you see in the diagram below is the separation of men and women at the different level, going from assistant professor to associate professor and then full professor. The gray part is is for men, and the yellow part is for women. And obviously, the very striking thing is that you see that in that faculty, until 2016, there was actually no women as full professors. And on that basis, it made us realize, and the whole department realized, that something clearly had to change. And what I'll describe in the rest of the talk is how we've taken action and how we've changed the procedure on the way we recruit professors. The encouraging side is that if you look at the assistant professor and the associate professor level, now you're actually at gender equality. Then you may hope that if you continue to apply this rigorous procedure in the recruitment, this will be translated into the full professor level. And I'll come back later on that to see how long it would actually take us to reach equality or gender equality across all levels, which is what we want in the end. So I come back to that, and I come back to another statement by Swiss universities, which emphasize the importance of improving the quality of recruitment procedures. And this is exactly what we've been doing. We've been doing it for the Faculty of Geoscience and Environment. And one of my goals now is to take it to the full university level. So we have a series of recommendations that we use in the faculty, and in fact, those have been used again at the Swiss universities level, which has published about a year ago a set of recommendations and good practices, which in fact are very close to what I will present in the next few slides. I'm actually quite happy that it's strictly followed in the Faculty of Geoscience and Environment, but now that I'm rector, I realized that it's the only faculty within the university that is strictly applying what is being recommended at the Swiss level. And I suspect that it's not fully applied in other universities in the country. So if you think that is not good enough, there's also very good resources on how to have good practices in such committees. And one thing that I've used quite a bit when I was chairing a search committee while I was dean is the information at the University of Harvard, which gives you very good information on the different steps in the recruitment process, but also, it has good example on questions that are appropriate to ask during the procedure and also questions that are inappropriate to ask. And I just invite you to go look at that because it's actually been very useful for me, and I think that all of us are being involved in such committees, and being aware of that just make the whole process better, I think. So here, just the steps that we've been using. So I think that it's quite important that we had a very thorough process, which involved mostly 5 steps. So the first one is how we create a commission. The second one is how we write the advertisement. The third one is how we select the candidates. Then we move to what is the interview part with a scientific presentation and a proper, more detailed interview. And I'll just say a few words about the conflict of interest and the presence of unconscious bias. So the first step is the composition of the commission, and I will not surprise you by saying that it's actually a very, very fundamental step, because these are the people who will select the candidates, so they will have a huge impact. To do that, we have some existing rules. So we need a mix. We have some profs, we have some intermediate staff, we also have students. But on top of that, what we've tried to make sure is to have a good gender balance, a good age distribution. I think it's important that we have also young people. It's not just the full professors who are there to decide. We also have a representative of the Equal Opportunity Office. It's actually been very useful to have an expert in the room that can tell us, well, what you're saying there is not appropriate, or that could be a potential bias. And then the final thing, and I think it's very important that the president of the commission, because he will just lead the discussion, is fully aware of the potential biases, and also make sure that there's an equal distribution in the time that is given to each member of the commission to speak. And actually, for me to have done that job, it's been quite interesting. The second part is writing the advertisement. So obviously the universities have strategic plans where they describe the next position. And I always thought that it was really important that all the members of the committees have access to that strategic plan. And I really informed on what is the goal of the position, to try to stay as fair as possible when we're going to select the person. The other thing that we do at that stage is that we decide the level of the position. And what we've done since now 6 years in that faculty is that we've used an approach where we advertise at the assistant professor level, but in the process, we try to have it at the open rank level for female applications and keep it at the assistant professor level for male applications. And then what we do is that, as usual, we ask a CV, a research and teaching statement. Then we do a short list of the candidates. I try to make sure that we have very fair criteria. It's very important on the CV, the quality of the research statement. We also try to, and other criteria, we also try to make sure that we follow DORA. I mean, DORA is still very vague. and it can be interpreted. And I see that in other faculties, it's actually interpreted differently. But we try to use it as much as possible. And then the final thing when we do the shortlist, and it's actually very important, is that we ask the committee member to evaluate separately female from male applications. And I think that's probably one of the measures that has shown to be most efficient. Then we invite the candidates, we have a presentation, we have, as I said, an interview. And then for the interview, we try to make sure that we have a set of prepared questions to try to make sure that we can compare the candidates, but also that we stay fair and then we avoid problems with unconscious bias. We also try to make sure that we have time to have fairly open discussions. And all that is followed by short and long debriefings where we eventually come up with the final list. We make sure that we treat conflict of interest. There's a document that we share with a member of committees. It's actually extremely important. We also try to make sure that people are aware of unconscious bias. And here I like to emphasize that's actually overwhelming. As it was said before by Janet, there's a lot of information that we can find on the web. There is some at the University of Lausanne. There's actually some video from a professor at the University of Lausanne who's been training people at EPFL. You can test yourself. Here's an example from the University of Harvard. And if you do these tests, you realize that we all have unconscious bias, yeah. And it's actually quite surprising, even if you think that you're not biased. When you do these tests, you realize that you probably are. So the question now is that, does it work? And I just want to show you the results. Here's the results of the last few years. So from 2012 to 2020. Here you have in blue, it's the number of female professors that have been hired, and in red, the number of male professors. And then we tried to have, we've implemented our procedures since 2015. And then you see that it had actually a dramatic effect. Okay, so you see that since 2015, we had a significant impact on the number of female professors that we had. So actually, what I like to emphasize here is that by having this more, what I like to say, a professional way to hire, it had a significant impact on that faculty, at least. I think I will skip that diagram. The last question I would like to address now is, of course, you want to know how long it will take us to reach gender equality and what the target should be. And to do that, with Nicholas Linder, who's now the current Dean of the Faculty of Geosciences and Environment, we've tried to develop a very simple model. It was just for us as a thought experiment, where we took the existing population of professors at the university scale and at the faculty scale. And then we assume that some professors will stay until they retire. Obviously, some will leave. We assume that the rector will be nice and give new professorship, so there will be some growth. We try to define a final target. Obviously, the final target we want is 50%. And then we define a hiring rate. And that's actually quite important because that will be the strategy of where we want to be if we want to hire 60% of female professor, 80% per year, and see how fast it will actually take to reach the target we've defined. Obviously, commission can sometimes, unfortunately, be a bit random, so we had some stochasticity. And with that simple model, we can calculate how long it will take us to reach gender equality. And here are the results of that model. So in the x-axis, you have the hiring rate of female professor we will hire. So it goes between 20 and 100%. And then in the y-axis, it's the time it will take us to reach the goal that we've set. Okay, and this model is done with two, that is the university scale and at the faculty scale. And what you can see is that if your hiring rate is close to your target, it might actually take you a very, very long time to reach that target. Okay, but what is reassuring is that if you go a little bit above that target, in fact, it can go really fast. So if you have a rate of 60% women, in fact, within 5 or 10 years at the university scale, you could reach a much better proportion. And I think that's something that we're using now in the rectorate of the university. and I know it's not going to be easy to do. So here it brings me to the end of the talk. I think that using these procedures, I'll show you the numbers, but we've reached, well, we've strengthened excellence of institution, however you define that. I've shown you a lot of graphs, but I want to show you all the people we hired. And I think that, you know, we have some very, very dynamic people who have since then brought a lot of funding, inspiring people. And I think we still have a lot of work to do, but by using these procedures, we probably made a step forward. And I will finish on that. Thank you.